What's up, guys? Kellen Brower here. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a long time since we posted on this channel, but coming to you today to give you my 2025 Motocross of Nations preview / picks, really a power rankings video of what I think is going to happen this weekend. We're going to go ahead and play MX vs. ATV Legends while we do it as well, repping Eli Tomac, number 4 in the MXGP class this weekend. And yeah, I'm just going to go through, kind of talk about what I think is going to happen this weekend, the nations that I think are going to do well, and give you my top 10 power rankings. So let's jump in, shall we? So obviously the race this weekend at Ironman Raceway, a staple now, excuse me, on the U.S. national schedule, and cool to see that it gets to host its first Motocross of Nations. I really don't like what they've done to the track the last couple of years, and obviously this year they changed it up even more. To kind of fit in everything that MXGP wants with, the start being where it is, a 180 first turn. Godzilla's gone now, and now it's just an uphill, downhill. They've changed too much about this track, and to me, kind of sucks, but it is what it is. I think it's going to be a cool venue to host the Motocross of Nations. There's a lot of areas for camping and everything, and already today, it looks like there's a lot of cool stuff going on. Bummed I'm not there this weekend. Didn't want to have to spend a ton of my own money to go after a long season covering the sport here in the USA. Not covering it for Swap this weekend. So really just hanging back, watching the races with some buddies anyway, and excited to just kind of see what happens. It's honestly a little bit easier to see what happens at this race when you watch it on TV anyway, just because you can see a lot of the track here at Ironman from, the sidelines, but you can't see everything, and the cameras do get a lot of stuff that you don't end up seeing. So I think it'll be easier to cover it from home anyway. And again, like I said, just excited to see what happens this weekend. So let's get into my power rankings, shall we? So first of all, I'm going to go through a couple honorable mentions. I've done this video in the past and kind of gone back to front, and I'm going to do that again. And so the winner of the video, or the winner at the end of the video, will be shown if you want to jump all the way ahead to that. But there's a lot of really cool names, cool countries, cool stories to talk about this weekend. So let's go through my honorable mentions, and I'll lead off with Team Japan, and I'm putting them way down here simply because I don't think they're going to factor in for a top 10 at all. But there is one big name on this team, and that, of course, is Joe Shimoda going in the open class. He was going to race MXGP, drops down to the open class here at the end, and I actually think that's a good decision because he's going to have a little bit less competition in the open class, might even factor in for a sneaky moto win when they combine the motos. And for those that don't know anything about Motocross of Nations, Friday today was simply a gate selection ballot and a parade of the teams and stuff like that. So nothing really going on much today other than that gate selection ballot. USA drew 35th of 37 or 34th of 37 nations going. So really tough break for them. But we've seen them turn around from that bad gate selection and do okay in the past. And then Saturday is 3 qualifying races. And this is the only time that the individual classes race each other. MXGP, MX2, and Open will be racing just their counterparts in that respective class tomorrow, and then that sets the qualifying for Sunday, which then is the gate pick for the nations on Sunday. So for example, if Australia goes 1-3 and they get a score of 4 in the qualifying races with Jet and Hunter Lawrence, for example, that's probably going to win them the qualifying on Saturday. They'll go to the gate first and 21st. So 1 through 20 is selected by the nations, and then the second rider going to the gate is selected after that, 21st through 40th. And the races on Sunday, race 1 is MXGP and MX2 combined. So that would be, if you're looking at Team USA, Eli Tomac and Justin Cooper on the gate together alongside Jet Lawrence and Kyle Webster. And then it is MX2 and Open race 2. So that would be Justin Cooper and RJ Hampshire going up against Kyle Webster and Hunter Lawrence, and obviously a bunch of other nations. And then the final race is the big dogs, MXGP and Open class together. Pretty much everybody's on a 450 class in the Open class. So it's basically, a giant 450 race. That is, of course, Jet and Hunter versus Eli Tomac, RJ Hampshire, and a lot of other names that we'll go through in this video. So there's a little bit of synopsis of what the race looks like. But yeah, going back to these nations, Joe Shimoda, definitely a big factor for Japan. I think he'll carry them to a decent result. I think they make the motos. I think he also fares well for his first chance on a 450. Excited to see how that goes. But don't see much out of Soyo Nakajimo or Yuki Okura. Just my personal opinion. Don't see a lot out of them. Let's talk about Team Brazil. Enzo Lopes are going to have a lot of Brazilian flags in the chat all weekend long. He goes in the MXGP class. Bernardo Tiburcio goes in MX2. And Fabio Santos, the multi-time Brazil champion, goes in Open. Good team. Honestly, a team that sneakily could get into the top 10 if things go their way. I don't think they will, but I do think that they'll fare well enough to make the motos no problem and do well on Sunday. Next, honorable mention, Great Britain with Conrad Muse, Dylan Walsh, and Josh Gilbert on the team. Gilbert goes in the MXGP class, Conrad Muse in Open, and I think that's actually good because I think Muse will fare well in the Open class, do a little bit better in that MX2 Open combo race for them. But this is not a British team that I think will podium, top 5, or anything like that. A top 10 would be a big win for them, in my opinion, and that's where I see them maybe peaking this weekend. Another honorable mention for Canada, Jess Pettis, Sebastian Racine, and Tanner Ward. This team would look a little bit better, in my opinion, with Dylan Wright instead of Tanner Ward, but Wright is hurt and wasn't selected for the team in the first place anyway because he was battling a bunch of injuries. So still a good team. I think they make the motos. I do not see them getting in the top 10, but it is on U.S. soil, a little bit closer to home for the Canadians, so you just never really know. A few more honorable mentions. We'll talk about Estonia real quick. Jorgen Matthias Talviku, who we've seen race in the U.S. a couple times, goes in MXGP, alongside Yusuf Parn in MX2, and friendly face Harry Kulas in Open. The only reason I even want to talk about Estonia is that I don't think that this is actually a very good team for them, especially with no Tana Liok, who's normally on the program. It's been a long time coming that we've finally not seen him race for Estonia. But somehow Estonia always kind of is one of those sneaky teams that ends up battling for the top 10 by Sunday. So just look out for them. I think that that's decent enough riders that they'll at least do semi-decent. Denmark was just outside the top 10 last year, so I'll bring them up simply to talk about Mikkel Harup, obviously going in MX2. He'll carry them quite high. In fact, I have him finishing 6th overall in MX2 on my board, my little prediction board that I have. So I think he'll carry the team. They have Magnus Smith and Mads Fredso going in MXGP and Open. Not much known about them, to be honest. I think they'll be okay. I think they'll make the motos no problem. I don't think they get top 10 this year, but you never know. Harp could definitely carry that team to some good results. Two more quick honorable mentions. Sweden with Isaac Gifting, Alvin Oslin on 450s, and then little-known Albin Gerhardsson in the MX2 class. Again, I don't know much about him, but Oslin and Gifting are very talented dudes, GP regular type of guys, and Gifting almost won in Sweden earlier this year at his home GP. So on his day, definitely very talented, could do some good stuff. Again, I think they're a sleeper pick for a top 10. They're not in my top 10. And then this one was really hard. This is my last honorable mention. This one was really hard to leave outside of the top 10, but I'll explain why these other nations made it in a second. For me, Switzerland, I have off the top 10 this year. They were top 10 last year, and their team this year is Jeremy Sewer on his factory Ducati, Valentin Guillot racing for Rock River Yamaha in Open, and then Nico Groitman in MX2. Again, not a very, pack for your punch kind of name. This is, a Swiss team that we normally see Arnaud Tonis or some other faces like that show up in this division for them. But Nico Groitman, I think, is a decent rider. Is he going to carry them to a top 10? I kind of don't think so, but we'll see. Always, interesting to see how it shakes out. And again, this is just my power rankings based on really where I think everyone is going into the event. Now, once the gates drop, the BS stops, as Phil Nicoletti likes to say, and I think a lot of things could change about all these teams, but going into Sunday, I think that this is fair enough to say that this would be a top 10 power rankings that you could most notably rely on. So let's go 10-1, shall we? It's been long enough into the video before we can get there. My 10th place finish nations-wise for 2025, I'm going Team Latvia. That is Carlos Racelis, Giannis Racelis, and Pauls Jonas. And Lewis Phillips, my cohort at the LVK More Than Moto podcast, very high on Latvia's chances. Dark horse for a top 5 even. Of course, Pauls Jonas, we know what he's capable of. He is a guy that's battled for world titles in MX2 and battled for race wins in MXGP. He'll be in the Open class. And for me, I think that he actually fits in as a guy that could battle for a top 5 in that Open division. So he'll carry the team quite well. But the Racelis brothers are like kind of sneaky, a little bit slept on group of riders. Giannis is the EMX 250 champion. Carlos, known as the Killer, has been fantastic at this event in the past and actually carried Latvia to one of their best finishes just last year. So I think that this is a very good team, a team that really could do a lot of damage this weekend. I have them 10th, they could go as high as maybe 7th or even 6th if things go their way. But I do also think that if things don't go their way, they could drop out of the top 10 quite easy. But for now, I have them 10th. Let's move on to the top 9 positions, and 9th place this year, 4th last year, I have Team Spain. Now, a massive hole, obviously, on this team with no Jorge Prado, but I don't know that that would have even mattered anyway. Prado's been pretty crap on his Kawasaki, and we're not even going to see him on a Kawasaki anymore in a couple weeks anyway, but he's not on this team. Ruben Fernandez goes in the MXGP class. Guillaume Ferres, familiar face in MX2 on a factory Triumph. And then little known, Francisco Garcia goes in open. Heard a little bit what he had to say today. Says that this is his first time ever riding a 450, so we're going to see how that goes. Again, I think he is kind of the reason why Spain is much further down this year than last year. A team with Prado, Fernandez, and Ferres at some point in the future could win this thing. But this year, I have them 9th. I think Fernandez fares well in MXGP. I think Ferres actually kind of stands a chance to win in MX2. That'll help them a lot. And then, obviously, Francisco Garcia will drag them down a little bit. So I have Spain in 9th, moving on to P8. 7th last year. Best ever result for them last year. And the first time they will ever race in the USA, Slovenia, with Tim Geiser carrying this team, of course, every single year. But I think sneakily a little bit better this year. It's the exact same team that got 7th last year. Jaka Peklaj in MX2 and Jan Panzer in Open. Why do I have them knocked down a little bit? Well, Tim Geiser went 1-1 last year. I don't think he goes 1-1 this year. He's coming off of a shoulder injury that kept him from winning the world title this year, has been back for the last 5 GPs, has not won a single Grand Prix. And to me, I think that that's a huge problem for them. If he was 100% healthy and in a position where he could win the MXGP class that he's in, suddenly this team goes into a borderline top 5 conversation. But with Geiser not on his game, I think they get knocked down a little bit. Panzer has looked better this year, so I think he will do better than he did last year. And I don't think Jaka Peklaj is going to be as bad as he was, but he is the weak link of this team. They're going to need something in the low 20s from him to, even fare for a potential top 5, and it's going to be tough to see that happening. So I got Slovenia in the 8th spot. Let's move up to the 7th spot. Again, another team that fared pretty well last year and is a strong team again this year. I've got Germany here. Of course, Ken Roczen goes in MXGP. Newly crowned MX2 world champion Simon Langenfelder in the MX2 division. And Max Spies, a buddy of mine, in the open class. Talked to Spies when I went to France a couple years ago when he was the alternate for Team Germany. And he was actually very polite and said that he thinks he wasn't quite ready to be on the German team just yet. But this year seems a little bit more fired up about it. He's very excited to race in the USA. He's always had a dream of coming to the USA, so I think he'll ride a little bit inspired this weekend. And then, yeah, Langenfelder and Roczen is a fantastic 1-2 punch for this country. However, Roczen, even in the press conference today, basically said, been dealing with the ankle injury, all through the summer, raced a couple nationals, still doesn't feel 100% back to himself yet. So that's going to factor in a little bit, and even because of that, I knocked him kind of far down my rankings board for the MXGP class, put him behind Koldenhoff, Geiser, Fevre, all those guys. And I think that matters. I think that, he's going to need some top 5 results to put Germany back on the map a little bit. And I don't know that I'm going to fully see that out of him at this particular Motocross of Nations. And then while I want to believe Langenfelder could win MX2, he has done nothing of the sort in this MX2 class in the past at this race. He has always kind of struggled at Nations for whatever reason that may be. And I haven't seen it yet, so I can't exactly bet on him doing it this year specifically. But he is the world champion for a reason. He says that world championship has knocked a little bit of pressure off of his plate coming into Nations, that in of itself. So I think that will even be something to kind of pay attention to this weekend where, hey, maybe he's feeling a little bit more himself at the Nations and can actually do some damage. But I got Germany 7th. Again, I think their peak is a top 5. But I think that their team is solid enough that there's no reason they should finish outside of the top 10. This team deserves to be inside of the top 10, and they will be there this year. Moving on to 6th, we're just outside the top 5 now, and this is a team that a couple years ago got on the podium with arguably a worse team than they're bringing to the race this year, but it's still a team that I think just doesn't have the same punch that it used to. This is the 2021 champions, Team Italy, in P6 for me. Antonio Cairoli in MXGP, Andrea Adamo, former MX2 world champion in the MX2 class, and Andrea Bonacorsi, the factory Fantic rider in Open. Now, Bonacorsi got a moto podium in MXGP earlier this year. We know what Cairoli is capable of course, and Adamo is a former world champion. So why is this team 6th? Well, Antonio Cairoli just turned 40. He's also still working on the kinks of this Ducati. It actually had a problem a couple times in the USA that they had to work out when he was racing it this year. And as good as he is, I don't know that I see him being the same version of himself anymore. And so a couple top 10 motos out of him would actually be pretty solid for the KG veteran, one of the greatest to ever do it. Now, Adamo is a guy that really could make or break this team. Adamo could win MX2. He really could. He could also finish like 7th in MX2. That's how up and down he's been. He's been a little bit more consistent this year, but his world championship year, I feel like he was even better, and it's not the same version of himself for whatever reason right now. So to me, I have them down just outside the top 5 because of some of the things going against them. Now, does this team have a shot at the podium? Absolutely. A lot of teams do. And I think that this is maybe the first team of the teams that I'm mentioning that really genuinely could land on the box with good results. But I just feel like something's not going to work this weekend for them, and I have them 6th. So here we go into my top 5 power rankings for the Motocross of Nations in 2025. In 5th place, multi-time former winners of this race and one of the most successful nations of recent memory, I've got Team France finishing 5th this year. Tough to knock them down this low, especially when they are, again, a very capable nation every single year. And you could arguably say that they've had almost worse riders go for them and still somehow win this race. But this is definitely a step down from what they could be. Romain Febvre is the MXGP world champion this year, and he is going to be racing in the MXGP class for Team France. So he is going to be the anchor that he usually is and has won this race before. But then behind them, it's a little bit of some question marks. We got Mathis Valland going in MX2. Of course, Tom Vial would be excellent right here if you could put him in, but he's not readily available. Thibaut Benestant also got injured right at the end of the season, so he's not available in MX2 either. So there's some names that really could have been a little bit better for France that are not here. Valland is not a bad rider, but he's definitely not that caliber, and I think that this is going to be a bit of a shock for him. His first ever Motocross of Nations as well, on a track he's never raced before. Doesn't have that French support of the home crowd behind him that really seems to propel them when we do race in France. So for me, I think Valland is going to be the weak link, and that's going to be a problem for them, especially because MX2 is usually where you do a heavy load of your carrying when it comes to overall results. But we'll have to see. Maybe he actually ends up riding very well. And then Maxime Renault is in the open class, and I want to say some good things about Maxime Renault. I really do, because he's won the open class before. He had won the open class in the USA in 2022 for France, and he's also won the Motocross of Nations with France before back in 2023. But this is not the same Maxime Renault right now. He hates the Yamaha that he is on right now. He is trying to get off that bike as quickly as possible, get out of his contract right now even to go ride for Ducati next year. So he's not feeling like himself. He hasn't been on the podium since March in MXGP. And I just don't know that I see him riding the same level that we've seen him at the past at the Nations. So, again, this is another team that very well could end up on the box, especially because of knowing their pedigree in the past. But for me, I got them 5th this year. We'll have to see how it goes on Sunday. All right, on to 4th. Here is my dark horse. Probably could win this race, nation. It is Team Belgium. I'm going to put them 4th this year. I want to put them on the podium, but I'm going to knock them down a peg simply because they haven't proved it yet. This is the youngest nation pretty much going to the line, and this team absolutely will, in my opinion, win the Motocross of Nations in the next 6 or 7 years with this exact team. But they're so young right now, and there's still some learning to be done. It is runner-up in the MXGP World Championship, Lucas Koenen, as a 19-year-old going in the MXGP class. His twin brother, Sasha, going in MX2, and Liam Everts jumping up to a 450 to go in the open class on his Factory Husqvarna. This is an excellent team. This is a team that almost challenged for the win a couple years ago in France, but I think that there's a couple things working against them. First of which, Sasha is still the same crasher that he always has been. He wins races and then he rolls up the windows right after that in the very next moto. He has got to be solid this weekend. I am pretty much there on Lucas being as solid as it gets. I genuinely think if there's anybody that could challenge Jet Lawrence this weekend, it could be Lucas Koenen, just on a speed and talent basis. But we'll have to see how he does for his first time really getting after it in the USA. And then Liam Everts was very good on a 350 in the open class 2 years ago in France. Actually got third in Moto 2 for Belgium 2 years ago on a 350. So he could actually sneak up there and surprise a lot of people this weekend. It has been a rough year for him. He had a horrific injury ending his 2024 season last year. Some people thought he wouldn't even be back for this year. He ended up recovering very well and did race almost this entire season despite dealing with injury after injury throughout the season. He had a really big crash in Finland about 3 months ago now. That's definitely set him back a little bit. But he also is heir to the Everts throne. Harry, the 4-time world champion, Stefan, the 10-time world champion, his dad, knows how to bring it every single time, and Liam has risen to the occasion for Belgium in the past. So to me, like I said, I'm putting them fourth because they need to prove it to me, but this is a nation that if they win this race on Sunday, I do not leave surprised. Some people might, but this is one of the best teams on the track this weekend. And again, I think we are 2 or 3 years away from this being your winning Motocross of Nations team. Onto the podium we go, though, and you might be a little bit surprised at this result, but to me, I think the Netherlands still gets third in this race, and I think that there's a chance they do even better than that. My cohort, Lewis Phillips, is down on their chances since Jeffrey Hurlings is not on this team, and he probably should be. Immediately they go into contention for the win if he is, but he was injured when they selected the team. He came back, he started winning Grand Prix, and suddenly it was like, oh, that was a rough pick to not have him on the program. But it's still a very good team. Glenn Koldenhoff in MXGP, the former now MX2 world champion Kai de Wolf in MX2, and Calvin Valandrin, who finished 6th in MXGP this year going in the open class. And yeah, this is, again, guys that have won the Nations before. De Wolf wasn't on the winning team, but they have won the Motocross of Nations in the past, have the Netherlands. And Valandrin and Koldenhoff were on the teams. Koldenhoff has won his class on USA soil at the Motocross of Nations before. He went 1-1 at Redbud in 2018, but this is not the same version of Glenn Koldenhoff. Still, though, he did finish 3rd in the World Championship this year on his factory Fantic, and I do think that he stands a chance to do very well again this weekend, and even said that he's been kind of taking it in because this probably was his last full season racing MXGP this year. I don't think it's going to be his last time on the Netherlands team, but definitely one of those guys that I think will ride pretty inspired this weekend. And then Kai de Wolf, why I think the Netherlands will end up 3rd overall, and where the carrying will come from is I think Kai de Wolf is going to win this race in the MX2 class. Not the motos. I think that he'll go somewhere in the range of like 4.7, 4.6, whatever you want to say for his moto scores. But I think that'll be good enough to get the job done in MX2. And he is coming off of really a frustrating and bitter loss of the world title that he only ended up losing by, 6 points, 9 points in the end to Simon Langenfelder on the KTM. So De Wolf is fired up, and De Wolf even joked in the press conference today that he was kind of bummed Hayden Deegan doesn't end up on Team USA. He was looking forward to that kind of mano-a-mano battle, and even messaged Deegan earlier this week and said, were you concerned that I was going to take you out? So a little bit of gamesmanship going on right there, but I think De Wolf has the ability to win this race in MX2, and that will carry Netherlands onto the podium, in my opinion. So P3 for the Dutchies. Now, top 2 results, and this is going to give you guys the answer to who's winning this race when I put this nation second, because I think it's just the best they can hope for this weekend. And I'm hoping for better, but I don't think it will happen. I think Team USA finishes P2. Now, I think it was a little closer to a 50-50 swing when you had Deegan and Sexton on this team. Maybe a good chance at actually winning it with that program. It gets knocked down slightly when you put RJ on the slot that obviously Chase Sexton would have been on. And then Deegan, I think, could have went toe-to-toe with Kai de Wolf to win MX2. Justin Cooper fills in for him now that Deegan's out with a broken collarbone. Now, is this a bad team? Not at all. And this is a team that definitely could still win this race, especially if Justin Cooper rides like he did in 2022 when the USA last won this event. Justin Cooper was amazing that day on a 250, got 4th in a moto, the best result any 250 rider had all day long. Insane stuff. And he's back on a 250. He's been riding it for about 4 days now, getting the testing done. He's said he's actually on Deegan's setup, literally the suspension and everything the same, and pretty much riding his race bike this weekend. So I think that is good news, because I think Justin Cooper is very capable on a 250, and I think Deegan had figured out that bike quite well. So good news there. I'm a little bit skeptical of RJ. I think that is going to be almost the anchor of the team, if you want to say that, just because I think Cooper will probably go top 10 in both motos, not win the MX2 division, maybe second or third, but definitely top 10 in both motos. RJ, I think, could go even top 5, both of his motos, but that might not be enough to get it done when we talk about the winning nation here in just a second, because you're going to need a big score, or a low score, I should say, to get the job done. And RJ is stable, consistent on a 450 now, but this is only his second time racing the Motocross of Nations. When he last raced it in France 2 years ago, he looked a little bit deer in headlights, to be honest, with how much the spectacle of this is, and having to really carry the flag for Team USA as a bad team that year. But even so, I just don't think that he looked comfortable. I think he's going to be a lot more comfortable this year. So I think he'll do okay. I think he'll be solid, but I do think that this team with Deegan and Sexton on it is just a slight bit better than what we're going to see this weekend. And it's a bummer they're not going to be there, but I still look at USA as finishing second. So on to my winners, my number one power ranking team. It's the defending champions, and they deserve to be here. Team Australia, I got them winning the Motocross of Nations for the second year in a row, the second time in their history. Because how the heck do you beat the Lawrence brothers right now? They are so good. They were so good at the end of Nationals. Hunter Lawrence was one of the few guys that actually toppled Jet Lawrence off for an overall win all season long. And it happened at Ironman Raceway, conveniently enough. Jet Lawrence fired back in the second moto at that race and won pretty convincingly, so he's very comfortable here. They both know this track very well. They both have proven to be very good on this track. And then SMX, they went 1-2, and Hunter Lawrence almost won the SMX championship, beating Jet Lawrence, which is, again, another tall task to ask. So they're pretty much the two best riders in America right now, if you really look at it. And here we go. They're on American soil in an environment they're comfortable with, and it's going to be unbelievable to see, you know, someone really go up against them and try to knock them off of where they are. Because I think that it is 100% possible they sweep the motos this weekend, with Jet winning both of his motos and Hunter winning the MX2 and Open combo motos. So there you go. That's a tough pack to beat. Now, what about their MX2 rider? This is, I hate calling it the weak link because he's such a talented rider, but we have to keep talking about Kyle Webster being the weak link for Australia. He got a 12th last year, then had a drop score, and they went 1, 2, 4, 8, 12 for a rather high score of 23 to win the Motocross of Nations in 2024. I think their score is lower. I think it's going to be closer to about the 17, 18 range this year. I think Webster's good enough to maybe even get a top 10 in a moto on a 250. He's riding Chance Hymas's Honda HRC Factory 250. Literally the entire team is under the same tent this weekend and have been training together for the last handful of weeks at the Dog Pound in Florida. So the camaraderie is there. Michael Byrne, the team manager, seems to be pretty high about their chances again this year. And it's going to take the Lawrence brothers having one of them having a bad day, I think, for someone to get up there and knock them off of the number one spot this weekend. I think Jet wins his class. I right now have Hunter winning his class, which is why I think it's going to be tough to beat them. Kyle Webster, I kind of knocked him down to about 8th in the MX2 class, and I'll go through my individual honors here in just a minute. But Australia right now is number one in the power rankings to me, and I think quite convincingly so. So I have them winning this weekend, and we'll see what happens on Sunday. So let's talk about Saturday just real quick, and I'm going to go through the individual classes here just kind of quickly to highlight them. Now, I rank these guys in lists of just power rankings of where I think they'll get overall. I don't think that this is how it shakes down in the qualifying races for these classes particularly, but I do think that just on speed and where everyone's at, I think this is how we can kind of look at it. So in the MXGP class, I have Jet Lawrence winning. I think he's going to win MXGP going 1-1 pretty much. Lucas Koenen I have second for Belgium. Eli Tomac third for Team USA. Roman Fevre, the MXGP world champion, in fourth for France. And Tim Geiser rounding out the top 5 for Slovenia. But this field is deep, man. Glenn Koldenhoff, Ken Roxon, Ruben Fernandez, Jeremy Seawer, Antonio Cairoli. That could be your top 10 tomorrow in the MXGP qualifying race, and I wouldn't be surprised. And so I think you kind of put those nations together. Obviously, that'd be a big win for Belgium if Koenen has a day where he is second overall and beats Eli Tomac. I think that power rankings wise going in, that's where I would put him on his highest kind of level. But, you know, he could go higher than that. He could also crash and go much lower than that. He crashed out of this race last year on a 250, for example. So we'll see how that goes. MX2 power rankings. I have Ida Wolf winning this, as I said. And then I actually do think Justin Cooper is going to slot P2 in this class. Now, The only reason I'm even saying that is because he's very good on American soil. And if you go back to the Assen race that he raced in the Netherlands for Team USA in the MX2 class 6 years ago, he won the qualifying race up against pretty much a lot of these same faces. Now, DeWolf and Koenen wasn't there. Langenfelder was, but some of these names that he's already beaten are there again, and I think that he fares very well against this competition. So I got Justin Cooper P2 in my MX2 power rankings, ahead of Sasha Koenen, Simon Langenfelder, and Andrea Adamo. The KTM trio right there, I think, are right behind him for Belgium, Germany, and Italy. So I think they'll fare well. And then how about Mikkel Harp? I put him 6th in my rankings for this, ahead of his Triumph compatriot there, Guillaume Ferres. I think Harp for Denmark carries them to a good result. I have him 6th in MX2, ahead of Ferres, 7th for Spain. Kyle Webster, I do have him 8th for Australia, but I still think that's good enough. Get a 12th or 15th or something, and then a drop score, and then I think he could be top 5 overall, no problem in this group. But I just have him 8th behind this group right now, especially him coming off of a 450. I don't think he's nearly as good as Jay Coop, dropping back down to a 250 in my opinion. Australians are going to be mad at me for that, but hey, I just picked your nation to win it, so how about you calm down in the chat there for just a minute. And then Camden McClellan and Mattis Valen, I have just behind them, rounding out the top 10 in MX2. Some good names as well that are right behind that, so I don't want to knock anybody too far down, but at least that's my top 10 for MX2. And then the open class, I actually find it to be rather interesting. I'm really curious to see how this race goes tomorrow in the quali race for open, because I do have Hunter Lawrence winning it, but I do think it's maybe a bit closer than it's going to get credit for. I have RJ Hampshire finishing 2nd in open, Joe Shimoda 3rd on a 450 for the first time. Calvin Vallanderen and Liam Everts inside of the top 5. Maxime Renault, Valentin Guillot, Pauls Jonas, Andrea Bonacorsi, and Jan Panzer for Slovenia rounding out the top 10. I think that's a pretty solid list of dudes right there. I think Hunter Lawrence deserves to be the number 1 in terms of power ranking in that group, but I think RJ could give him a run. I think Joe Shimoda, his starts have come around lately. He's going to be fired up on a 450, and he has to carry Japan into the motos with a good result tomorrow in the quali race as well. But yeah, if he gets in, I think overall 3rd looks good for Joe. I like what I see out of Calvin on that bike as well, factory Yamaha, so we'll see how he does. And either way, it's going to be interesting. So excited for this race. Like I said, a little bit bummed I'm not there when the gates will drop on Saturday and Sunday, but still one of my best, or my favorite races every single year, the best event of the year in my opinion. Can't wait to see what happens. Australia, USA, Netherlands, my 1, 2, 3 power punch going into the nations. Let's get involved in the comment section below though. What do you guys think is going to happen this year at the Motocross of Nations? Who's going to win it in your eyes? What are your nations looking like, and how do you think it'll stack up on Sunday? Thanks for watching a little preview video of the Motocross of Nations here. Hope to see you guys in more future videos on the channel. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we'll see you guys soon. So long for now.